Salutations, all, and welcome back to another kitchen adventure. Thank you all to our loyal followers who have stuck it through the times of absence. I do apologize, but we are here and we're back, and hopefully be a little more consistent for you guys that were kind enough to subscribe and help our channel out. So, what are we doing today? Well, being that we all work, being that we all have to pay bills, we are all suffering from the high inflation and the grocery costs. We have to get back to the basics. We have to get back to why we started doing this channel to begin with, and that was to teach you to not rely on your local grocery store for all of your food needs. That being said, we're going to get into Grandma's buttermilk biscuits. Let's get into it. All right, first things first, let's get into our ingredients. You're going to want some all-purpose flour. Now you can sift this flour if you like. It adds air to the mixture. We're going to use some baking powder. Make sure we're using baking powder and not baking soda, okay? Baking powder. Buttermilk. Now you can make biscuits without buttermilk, but it does add a lot of tang and some moisture. Got our salt, some butter. Any stick of butter of your choosing. It's best to get it in the sticks. It's just easier to measure that way. Some honey. Also, something that's not necessary for this, just adds a little flavor. Getting into our tools, obviously some measuring cups, measuring spoons as well. A cutter of some sort, biscuit cutter, cookie cutter, however you're going to shape up your biscuits, right? And a mixing bowl. Now, what I did not bring out, unfortunately, was the rolling pin. We're going to need that as well, all right? Okay. So first thing that we're going to do is oh yeah, let me not forget. So when you cut your butter into your cubes, you want to keep it as cold as possible. So I cut mine into little chunks and then I put it in the freezer while I'm mixing my other stuff up. You want it as cold as possible. So we're going to start off with our dry ingredients. But before we move past the butter, the reason that we want it cold is we want to keep those chunks alive as much as possible. If you mix your dough and you smooth out those chunks, you're going to end up with scones and not biscuits. And maybe that's what you're going for. But this is Texas, and that's not what we want. So we've got our dry ingredients in. Your salt, your baking powder, your flour, obviously, is all going to go into this mix. Once you've got it all in there, you're going to want to incorporate it together the best that you can. Mix it and mix it and mix it until you think it's overmixed. Just really get it all mixed up in there, okay? Now, for this particular task, I use a fork just because it helps to break up any chunks of flour that might be in there, or as we start to create the dough, you'll see it becomes very crumbly, very chunky, if that's the proper term for it, which is actually what we're going for. So here we're just making sure our dry ingredients are well meshed together. Once we got it well incorporated, we're going to make a little pocket there, and we're going to go in with our wet ingredients. Notice that my measuring cup has a lip on it. That is for your liquids. You can still use the other side. A cup is a cup at the end of the day. Or if you really want to be precise about all of this, as opposed to using your measuring cups and spoons, you can always get a scale and weigh everything out. Baking is a science, so you're definitely going to want to follow the instructions and the ingredients there until you're comfortable enough to play around with the recipe yourself. Make sure you get all that honey out of that spoon. We don't want to waste any of that deliciousness. Alright, so we're going to start mixing that in, get that honey broke up into the buttermilk, and then we'll start working our way out. Apologize for the camera roll. My better camera is out of order at the moment, but you get the point. We'll make it through. We're going to survive this. Alright, so I'm taking my time, because remember, we're not wanting to mash it down. We want those big chunks of dough like that, a little rustica for you. And if you notice, I have not added the butter yet. Because remember, I want to keep those chunks as full as possible. And it is warm in my little kitchen there. So that's why I have not added the butter quite yet. I want to get those chunks started. If your mixture is a little too dry, as this one is, you can always add just a little more buttermilk. Remember, you can always add, but you can't take away. So if it's not quite coming together, go ahead and add a little more buttermilk. So you can see how mine's very, very dry, still crumbling, not quite forming. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a little more juice. You just want to get it to the point where it will begin to come together so that we can pull it out as a dough ball. So I've got my butter out of the freezer, and I'm starting to move a little faster because, like I said, it is extremely warm in this Texas kitchen in the beginnings of our summer, and I want to keep the integrity of that butter as strong as possible. So it looks like I'm really mashing. That's just a light patting. I'm trying to test the moisture of the dough as I mix it in. And I've determined, you know what, it's just not wop enough. So we're going to go in with a little more buttermilk. Now in the ingredient listing, you'll see that I add for 3 extra little spoons of buttermilk. That's just for the end. And you'll see right before we put them into the oven, I'm going to brush the tops of the biscuits with the buttermilk. That's just to add a little color to it. In the South, if your biscuits don't have a certain tone, you may get run out of the house. So you definitely want to make sure they're beautiful. So you can see it's starting to come together. It's moist enough that I can get the remaining crumbs out of the bowl. But you can also still see those big, beautiful chunks of butter. It's very important. I cannot stress that enough. You do not want to blend that butter down smooth or you're going to end up with scones, all right? Look at the chunks. Look at the chunks. All right, so I put down a little bit of flour. For obvious reasons, we don't want the dough to stick, and we're going to begin rolling this bad boy out. You can roll it into a circle, you can roll it into a square, whatever suits you. You just want to get to, for most times, I would say maybe about a half an inch thick on your dough, maybe an inch. It's really going to depend on how big the biscuits you're trying to make. You know, what are you using them for? Are you going to cover them with gravy? Are we making sandwiches? So again, it's really going to depend on you, and it just takes a little bit of playing around with it. So you can see we're getting that rolled out. You can still see big swaths of butter and butter there. Now on this first pass, once we get it roughly, you know, a decent thickness there. You can see there, I'd say that's maybe 1/4 of an inch thickness. We're gonna fold. The folding creates layers within your biscuit. So you do have like your classic buttermilk biscuit that's just nice and crumbly, like these will be at the end. But you also see in the store those biscuits that are labeled as flaky. This is how you get your flake, all right? Same thing like with croissants or puff pastry and things like that. It's the folds that allow for us to get those layers. Now, once I folded that twice, just FYI. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to punch down with my cutter. Do not twist, right? That was the hand wag there. You don't want to twist. You just want to push down, straight down. And the reasoning for that is if you twist it, it will cause the dough to basically seal your edges, and it's going to keep your biscuits from being able to grow up to be proper little vessels of gravy. So we don't want to twist those edges, just punch down. And then, of course, once you've got your first ones cut, you're going to take that scrap dough, roll it back out again, and start this process all over. So you don't want to waste any of that dough, right? Or you can take that dough, you chop it into little pieces, roll those little balls up, and then you make some chicken and dumplings later on. I'm just saying, the point is, use all of your dough. So I'm greasing up my cast iron. Feel free to use butter in yours if you like. I mean, there's plenty of butter in those biscuits, but I mean, who can say no to butter, right? Then when you're putting them in your pan, whatever type of pan that you're trying to use, you want to get them as close together as possible because that helps in the formation of your biscuits. It helps them to rise up as opposed to spreading out. So get them in there nice and tight, kissing cousins and all that jazz. snuggle up. Now we've got the oven set at 425. Yeah. Well, before we go into the oven, we talked about brushing the tops of those biscuits with some of that buttermilk. I don't know where my pastry brush is, so a good old finger will do the job. It always has. All right, let's go. So 15 minutes later, my Steven Spielberg retraction there, trying to be all cinematic for you guys. I kid. 15 minutes later, this is what we've got. All right, fresh out of the oven, 425, 15 minutes, cast iron, hot, steamy little biscuits for you, just like Grand's makes. So again, back to the basics. Simple recipe with ingredients that you likely already have in your house. Easy way to make an accompaniment to a meal or a meal in general, baby. Save that money. Subscribe to this channel. Thanks, guys.